The first time I was ever exposed to video games was when I was 7 years old. I lived in a very poor village. It was like a, yeah, I was living in a really poor village in Korea. I was raised by my grandmother first. I never even got to know my mom until I was like 9 or 8. But anyways, so since it was a poor village, it was like a really rare thing if somebody had a video game system. And whoever did have a video game system would be like a really popular kid in town. And we would always be at his house. And the first video game system I ever saw was something called the Sega Master System, which was the Sega system before Genesis. And the first game he had was something called Double Dragon. And I always had an interest in martial arts and just beating people up with bare hands in general. I grew up with like Bruce Lee films and such. And like I was extremely interested in Double Dragon. And I was when I was a little kid, I was one of the weaker kids that was like really nice and whiny. So I got picked on a lot, and like I would always be the last guy to play. Like everybody would take turns playing it, and I would always be the last one playing. And oftentimes it wouldn't even happen. We would just get kicked out by the kid's mom or something. Like, all right, this is too many kids. Get the hell out. And whenever I didn't get to play, or even just waiting for my turn, I would just start crying and making a scene, and they would eventually let me play for like 5 minutes before they took the controller away from me. So once my mom eventually took me to her home, and I started living with her when I was like 8 or something. And like that's when I started having access to video games, because there was just because she lived in the cities, in this in the poor villages, like everybody was nice, everybody, but in the frickin' city, like there's just so many pushy people that were just in a hurry of some sort, and they were always busy and stressed out, and it was just a much different scene. And that kind of changed me a little bit. It turned me into a pushy bastard too, and I kind of stopped being a nice guy after a while. Like, I sort of turned into a dick. And I started learning fighting. Like, I started learning Taekwondo because my mom insisted that every man should know how to fight. Plus, like, if you're living in Asia, like, there's really good chances that you will end up learning a fighting style of some sort. China, like all Asians, we all end up learning something. We all end up learning how to whoop ass in some way, and we all think we're tough. And if you even look at us funny, we'll end up fighting you. That's what it's like to live at Asia. Believe me. At least back then. Maybe things are different now. Who knows? But like, I start. There were just arcades everywhere in Korea, like every frickin', just everywhere. It was impossible to miss them, and like the general thing said about arcades was all the adults would like encourage children not to go to the arcades, because a bunch of gangsters would hang out there like all the time, just bad seeds, skipping school all the time and whatnot, and just whatever. And like, and I want to revisit a painful memory. Ever since the beginning, like I was, so this is around the time when I started having access to video games. And like I would go to the arcade like every day, and my mom would end up giving me money every day. She gave me like 1,000 won, which is basically the Korean equivalent of $1, and you would get like 10 games out of it. So every single day she would give me $1. And if I was annoying enough, she would give me $2 more for the day. And like I was always a pretty good gamer, so 10 games would last me a while. And I was particularly good at fighting games. And fighting games were often the one that the gangster would be around trying to determine who was the toughest man. And fights would happen a lot. Like I would see a fist fight all the time, and it was just ridiculous. And so these were like all young kids, like all high school kids, and I was really good at fighting games. So I was like an 8-year-old that was beating up a bunch of high school kids, and they would just often be humiliated by this. They didn't like it. They would hate it. They would think they're stupid or something. And I would often never even look at them in the eyes or anything, because a lot of them were just bad kids. And like, but one day I got a little carried away and I started making fun of the guy that I beat. He was in your usual gangster attire. He looked 18 or something. He had black leather coat on with jeans, and he had sunglasses. And you had your two Koreans, you had the friendly guys and the unfriendly guys, and he was an unfriendly guy. And I started making fun of him for some reason. And he didn't like that very much, so he kicked me in the face. And we're talking about a Korean guy kicking your face. Like, it was a good kick. And it cut my freaking face open. Like, it like immediately brought me to the ground, and I started bleeding on the floor, and I started crying. And he must have been a really bad character, because not a single person, like there was just all kinds of people there, and not a single person wanted to say anything about this. They just watched me cry and just didn't say anything to the guy. And the guy walked out of the arcade. But even after that, I continued going to the arcades because I was just an addict. I was a video game addict. My addiction was so bad that I skipped school for 4 months straight. Without my parents knowing about it. Like, I had two parents. Like, I had my mom, and I had some white dude who was my stepdad. And the white dude was really nice to me, and like, but my mom, like, both of them didn't know a thing about me skipping school because they were both really busy. And like, when my mom found out about it, she was so fucking pissed. And the white guy was so nice to me, so he didn't really say anything. He just kind of laughed about it, in fact. He thought it was funny. But my mom was so freaking pissed. She hit me in the head with a frying pan, which is one of the most painful experiences of my life. That is a good weapon. If there's a frying pan laying around, and there's an intruder in your house, grab the frying pan, dude. That shit hurts. But anyways, that's the story of something. Goodbye.